counting. 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's good. Thank you. Awesome. Pastor, do you know if we're waiting on people or? All right. Let me move some of this out of the way here. Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys, for coming. I appreciate it. And taking some time out of your Saturday to come and learn about some parenting and some strategies. Hopefully it'll benefit you and you'll feel like you take away some things. All right. So my name's Amanda. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor here at North Carolina, and then I hold other credentials in a few other states. But I own Revelation Counseling Center, providing counseling services to clients in the Carolinas and a couple other states, Idaho and Minnesota as well. And so my goal as a counselor is really, to help clients work through any issues they have, and in this case we're talking about parenting. So hopefully you'll, like I said, find some benefit in what we're going to talk about today and move through, some strategies and take something home that you can really use to just implement and find some benefit out of. And so I used to work for an organization called Christian Family Solutions. They're a parasynodical organization within the Wells doing mental health counseling. And so that's how I got hooked up here and kind of getting started with my own practice. So and then I'll have some information for you, and my information is also in that packet too, if you have anything or you know of anybody who may need of any support as well. So just a quick disclaimer, obviously this is really for encouragement and educational purposes. It does not constitute a therapist-client relationship. Just because you've shown up today does not make you a client. If that's something that you're interested in, you let me know, or obviously seek out other mental health services. But also recognize that every family is unique. So as you learn some of these strategies or we talk through them, please do just consider how you're going to use them and if they're beneficial for you and what you would like to do with them. All right, so what are we going to be talking about today? So we're going to really try to work through understanding some common struggles of parenting, of kind of what do children bring to us and what do we face as parents, and then talking about how do we balance love and authority. Talk about obviously parenting from a faith-centered perspective, so not just implementing strategies, but how do we do that from a faith perspective, and then obviously applying those strategies practically and what you're going to be able to take home with you. So our guiding principle today comes from Proverbs 22:6. Oh, I think is that a child, an Amber Alert going on? What is it?
A wanted person.
Oh, a wanted person. Sorry. No, it's not a problem. All right, Proverbs 22:6. So train up a child in the way he should go, even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Really recognizing what this verse means. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if we do everything perfectly and everything right, that our children are going to be perfect and do everything correctly. More that we're here to instill in them, some of these strategies, and then also a faith and, those principles. And so recognizing that if we can instill those in our kids early on, or if we're beyond early on, starting now, if our children should go wayward, whether that's behaviorally or from a faith perspective, then it's still kind of in them, right? And so perhaps they will be able to come back to that and ground themselves in that. And so this is kind of, like I said, going to be our guiding verse for today. We just really want to recognize that when we talk about parenting especially, we are really just trying to guide our children into something and instill these principles and these values in them, but recognizing that they may not always listen to us, they may not always do it perfectly, but hopefully at the end of the day, they'll be able to come back to that, they'll be able to remember what we've given them. So, a couple things to remember within parenting, and as we move forward, you're not alone. I think every parent would tell you that they struggle no matter what stage of life. Maybe some stages are easier, some are more difficult, but you in fact are not alone. And no parent is really alone in those struggles. And then obviously extending grace to ourselves when we're parenting. We're not going to get it right all the time. And so recognizing that if we don't get it right, we want to extend the grace to ourselves. We want to be compassionate toward ourselves, just like God extends his grace to us and is compassionate toward us. And so it doesn't have to be about perfection, but hopefully, we're really thinking about how do we just make this parenting journey a little bit, better for ourselves, more functional, and we're growing out of that and helping our children to grow through that as well. All right. So, what are some words that best describe your parenting experience right now? It can be positive, negative, neutral, and if you're willing to share, that would be amazing.
I was looking at your things. It's definitely overwhelming. I mean, that's not where it is right now, but it's overwhelming. But it's also happy and loving and
sure.
It's all exhausting. It's
all of the above. We can.
Yes, it is. It is.
You can check all of the boxes. Yeah. I think that's great that you're able to see both of those sides, right? Because I think sometimes we can get stuck in like the all or none too, like it's all overwhelming or there's no problems when really, right? There's things that we need to address.
I think mine's more overwhelming with a sense of like worry, I guess you could
say.
Mm-hmm. Having anxiety for the helicopter mom. Is that enough?
That's a good term to use.
Just anxious for them.
Okay.
And their safety.
Sure. So you have those really good parts to it, the joy and the love. There's that other part over here that's like,
that part is overwhelming and exhausting. I mean, it is.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Anything else?
Similar to her.
Yeah.
Like we're at the stage where we're hitting milestones. I have a younger one, about a 2-year-old.
Okay.
So we're hitting bigger milestones and stuff like that. So it's really exciting, but we're also teething, and we've started school, and he's just got a whole new something of emotions and just stuff. And I'm trying to figure it out. I don't know that he knows what's going on. I'm probably opposite in her is probably I'm not the helicopter parent. I'm like, go and do.
Good point. Have fun. Be you.
Don't fall off the 6-foot ladder, please.
Okay.
Which is kind of funny because we're siblings.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. So you got a little bit of an opposite perspective. I gotcha. Yeah. But recognizing, it sounds like, though, how both play off of each other a little bit, and I'm assuming you probably talk, right? I'm assuming you talk about parenting and your kids a little bit, and I would be curious if you talk through like, well, this is what I'm going through and how I do it, and this is what I'm going through, and kind of contrasting that a little bit. Oh, that's funny.
Some days the kids are crazy, and sometimes they will actually listen. So. The worst is getting one of them up and then getting both of them to go to sleep.
Sure.
Especially going to sleep.
That's tough, huh?
Yeah, sometimes they'll just...
It used to be really good.
Listen, and you would think playing sports and everything would tire them out, but usually not the case.
No.
And then they'll... well, for me it was different because I was the only, like my brother's 20 years older than me, so I grew up by myself, and like there was nobody to feed energy off of, so like I listened, I just went to sleep. They'll like go off of each other, and it's sometimes not enough. So.
I get that.
Overwhelming.
Well, I hear you really saying though that it like you feel that chaos of like some days are okay and some days aren't, and it's really kind of unstable sometimes, or
Some nights they're just like, all right, I'm going to bed, and then some nights it's like an hour and a half trying to get them to sleep, and then it's 11 o'clock at night before I finally sit down.
Sure, yeah. I would imagine too that would just bring up so much stuff within you, right? Especially if you're like anxious, or even if you're just kind of like go and do, but there's always these emotions and these feelings that come up when our kids do those things, or it's out of the norm, perhaps, and you're like, oh, last night you went to bed, but like, what is going on, right? And then you're kind of questioning and asking those questions. Well, thank you guys for sharing. I appreciate it. So we're going to talk about then, maybe through some of those things, hopefully, and hopefully you'll leave with like, okay, I can try to apply that and see if it gets a little bit easier. Okay, well, we've already talked about a couple of some parenting struggles, right? But obviously some of these, which I think a lot of us have probably dealt with, I don't know about you, but I definitely have, dealt with emotional outbursts with my own kids, right? I'm probably the parent who, when my child threw themselves on the floor in public, kind of scooped them up and was like, all right, I'm just going to march out here, and they're flailing their arms and their legs, and I'm like, I don't know, we just got to go, or maybe those experiences where they're like throwing themselves on the ground and I'm just standing there like, when is this going to be done? What's next? Right, so something that we probably all have dealt with, tantrums, emotional outbursts. I have some older kids, so definitely some disrespect and defiance that probably goes on. Little kids can do that too, right? They do it maybe in a little different way, but if you get the eye roll or you get the, turn of the back and I'm just not going to listen to you, or whatever you say, and, they walk away, but definitely in dealing with that, but then recognizing like how that moves through stages as well, and as our kids grow up, how some of these challenges morph, and that's kind of what you were saying too, like it feels chaotic sometimes, like why is it this way now, and like why is it this way tomorrow, and then of course sibling rivalry, if you have multiple children, right, the bickering, the conflict, sometimes some competition if they're in the same kind of activities or just vying for attention. Yeah, exactly. Right? What does that really look like? And, I had somebody tell me one time, like, I thought so-and-so was the favorite child, and they thought I was. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, that's an interesting concept. And they had no clue, right, that each other thought that. And then I was more curious at what was going on around that and why each one thought that. And then, obviously, screen time, devices, right? I don't know if you guys struggle with that or have those issues, but did you say terrible? Yeah, because they get like super locked in, right? And it's hard. And I feel like the screen time battles are a little bit different than just like watching television or, doing something maybe that doesn't suck them in as much. It's just something about it. So those are some of the, just kind of common challenges. We've already talked about a little bit for you guys, but what else do you guys notice? And there's the worksheet in your packet if you want to follow along with that you can write this down. But versus like, if you have anything more specific, perhaps, what do you notice specifically? Mm-hmm.
It's a big, huge change at this age, and she has become a screamer. Like not full on like she's not in public, but at home.
Sure.
At home, if she wants something, she doesn't want to get up in the morning. Mm-hmm. She's a screamer.
I can't ever get up.
And this is recent too. This has not been like.
Yeah.
It's out of the norm. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And then the 10-year-old, he is right there at the talking back, but it's only to me. It's not to anyone else. It's just to me.
Okay.
So I think those are the two.
Well, the problem is he's 10 years old and he's like as big as you.
Yeah,
so.
but he also has ADHD and he's autistic. So.
Okay.
Just high functioning autistic, not, but so that's something that is hard for me, and I think because I have an education background in this, but I still struggle with it as a parent, because I can teach a child, but when it comes to parenting, it's like, okay, what do I do? Because what I apply in a classroom does not work with my own child.
Absolutely. I totally can empathize with that.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. So sounds like you've got the screaming behaviors, and then you've sort of got this back talk and this defiance and confrontation. Yeah.
We do electronics on Friday and Saturday.
Okay.
And like one of the consequences was the back talking and like you don't get your device this weekend. And so like
like right now.
Yeah, like all day it's been, can I have this? Can I have it? And no, like you cannot have this. So along with the screen time kind of like you were saying.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it all kind of intertwines together.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, you are so right. And I think that's a good point you bring up, that it's all intertwined, because these concepts we're going to talk about today too, you know, they can really be generalized and used for a lot of different behaviors, right? Like poor behavior is poor behavior is poor behavior, sin is sin is sin, right? And so not to say that everything works all the time perfectly for everything, but the idea is that if we break it down to, okay, this is a behavioral issue versus, oh, it's this issue, this issue, this issue, what do I do with that, right? Then it becomes a little easier because we say, okay, that's just a poor behavior and I have tools to address that. But I would be curious, and you don't have to answer now, but just about the notion of struggling to implement it for your own kids versus implementing it for other kids. And maybe after we go through this, maybe we can talk a little bit more about that, but it's a good point, because I think it is tough, you know. It's easy to distance on one end, but then like we get so riled up on the other. Yeah, awesome. Any other challenges?
I'm with my 2-year-old basically all day. Basically. I have a hard time, like I know I should set this boundary, like we're not having this, but I only have so much patience, and when my patience runs out, I end up giving in, and I know that I'm doing this, but stopping it is a little more difficult. But then my husband is kind of the same way with, you know, he can come in and be like, we're doing this. And it's kind of like, is he doing this because you are a male figure? Is he doing this because he knows you mean business? Like, you're not with him all the time, so like, this is what we're doing, but we also can go have fun if you do these things, or, you know, whatever. So it's kind of a little frustrating that he just comes in and it's like, boop.
He doesn't
happen all the time, but usually he can make him listen a lot better than I can.
And I would imagine that brings up a lot of just like frustration too, right? Because you're like, I'm with this little child all day and I just want him to listen to me, and you just get to step in and like, look at that.
Some too, so I mostly done nap in bed and all of that, and he started coming in a little bit and doing bedtime, and he would come back out after like 10 minutes and be like, sleepy dust. I'd be in there an hour and a half.
Gotcha.
10 minutes.
Yes. Well, I definitely can empathize with your, you know, kind of the dichotomy of that. I know that my son definitely responds differently to me than he does my husband, who is sitting in the back there. And so I totally get that, you know. And so maybe there's some of that too, where, you know, how do we use that to our advantage? But then also, how do we like find the middle ground of saying like, maybe I could be listened to as well at times. So as we go through this today, hopefully, again, there should be some takeaways. But at the end of our time today, I'd be curious to see if like you have a differing opinion or kind of different thoughts on kind of some of that stuff, and if you're willing to share later. All right, awesome. Thank you, guys. Okay, so why do these things just feel so hard? You know, I think it's one thing to say my child misbehaves, right? It's one thing to say, like, I said do this and they did this other thing. I think really the issue that comes into play is that emotional component. It's that not only did you not listen to me, but now I'm like really frustrated, or I'm really angry, or I'm really hurt or sad or whatever. So some things to really consider as far as like why things maybe just feel a little bit more difficult when our kids disobey us, or more challenging at times, is some of it is our own stuff, right? How we're raised, what we've gone through, what we've been told. You know, if you have background in this, and somebody says, hey, if you do this thing, this is going to work, right? And you're like, it's not working. You know, you told me it was going to work. You know, or just this notion of like, what are my values and my beliefs, right? If we have a core value, say, of respect, and I was raised with, this is what you do, this is how you respect, and this is what it is. I was told that growing up, and then I tell my children that, and they don't do it, right? It's kind of like a gut punch, like, okay, so I really want you to be respectful, and you're being disrespectful. And I think with that, too, recognizing the snowball effect, I think that comes on in our minds, becomes like, okay, so now you're being disrespectful. So what does that mean for you in the future? What does that mean for you as a human being? What does that mean for you as a member of society, right? And if I look at my children and I think, wow, that little person is an extension of me, what are people going to think of me when he's laying on the floor in the mall screaming his head off, right? Or what are they going to think of me when, you know, I just sit here and I say, hey, do you mind doing that? And he is like, no, why would I do that? What are people going to think of me? And so I think that's a big part of it too. So as we go through today as well, kind of assessing that for yourself too, like what is that hitting? What is that hitting? What are those emotions that are coming up? Sometimes it's difficult too because we just don't have a clear strategy. So when you were talking about like the ups and downs and like one day it's one way and one day it's another way, I could feel that like sense of uncertainty and that just uncomfortableness that comes with that, you know, that idea of like, I don't know what to expect today. And so not having a clear strategy can be really difficult. So that includes struggling with boundaries, right? Includes struggling with consequences. Maybe it's just, oh, that's a new behavior and I just don't even know how to respond to that. So we're going to talk through today how to develop some of that and give you kind of a leg up on that as well. And then having unrealistic expectations, and then obviously comparison, right? If you're on social media, that can happen, right? We can see the one side of somebody's great life, you know, and you're just like, look at their kids doing all these great things, and mine are over here throwing a tantrum in the corner. Like, what is with that? When my kids were growing up, we would go to the movies, and they were the only children, like, running this way. And I would be like, why? No other child is doing that. Why? And that doesn't mean other kids weren't doing it in other environments, but I would be like, what is going on? You know, so sort of that idea of expectations, of comparison, and then, you know, this when we talk about unrealistic expectations, thinking about how much power do I really have, and what am I setting my children up for, right? Because sometimes we can set expectations really, really high, and sometimes we can actually set them really, really low, like so low that we're like, whatever, and then something happens, and I'm like, oh, why did that happen, and what's going on? So really thinking kind of through some of that too as we move through our time today. But if it feels hard, it's probably because it is, and that's okay. But I have a feeling that everybody else would probably say the same thing. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard at times. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about parenting styles. There's going to be another worksheet in your packet that kind of goes through some of that, so you can just kind of follow along if you'd like. And then some biblical foundations for parenting. All right, so one thing to really understand with parenting is that our children, they will do what we do. There used to be a saying, I know that I heard it sometimes growing up, which was, do what I say, not what I do. Yeah, kids don't do that. Human beings don't do that, you know. God says, like, it's important we all come together that in fellowship because we all benefit from the modeling and what we're all doing together and what we're seeing people do. And so, yeah, kids will mimic us, and sometimes to our disadvantage if we're doing something that's not so great. So really, but thinking about what are we modeling at home, right? So how do we handle conflict, whether that's in our marriages, our relationships, with people like in society? what do we do? How do we handle things that come up that are difficult? Do we show respect and humility? Do we avoid? Do we blame? Our kids are going to look at that, right? And then that's going to kind of tumble into them. How do we manage our emotions? Are we emotionally grounded? Are we pretty consistent in our emotions? Or can we blow up at times? Or do we lack self-control, right? Kids, especially when they're little, they're sponges, right? And they're just seeing some of those things and sucking all of that up. And then how do we practice our faith at home? And the reason this is a big one too is because we're going to really talk about our faith as like the cornerstone of parenting. So from the inside out, it's going to guide what we do. You've probably heard that saying, like, parenting doesn't come with a manual, right? Well, very true, and there's a lot of opinions and manuals out there. But I think from a faith perspective, our Bible is our manual, right? It really does lay the groundwork for us. And if we can kind of look at, okay, what do some of these verses say and how do we use them to guide what we're doing? I think it'll be a little bit easier going forward. So, something to think about as we move through today, and then as you go home and think through, how do I handle conflict? Or what are they seeing me do on a daily basis? And is what they're doing, is that actually a little bit reflective of what's going on at home? So here are just some parenting styles I'm going to go through, just so you kind of have like an understanding. Now, I don't necessarily think that everybody is all of one or all of another. I mean, you probably do get the extremes in some cases, but it's probably more like we have some of each. But let's just talk a little bit about them. So we have authoritarian parenting. So what this is this is going to be like really high expectations, but like low nurturing. So it's my way or the highway. You do what I say, and that's the only way it is. There's no arguing. There's no talking about it. And if you don't follow through, I'm going to punish you. And there's very little, like, when I say nurturing, meaning like empathy. We're not going to sit down. We're not going to talk about it. Maybe we're not validating emotions. And it's really focused more on like control and conformity. Like, you're just going to do what I say, and this is how you're going to be. So that would be authoritarian. And then we have permissive. So that's low demand, so low expectations, but high nurturing. So maybe we're avoiding confrontation. Maybe we're saying like, well, I don't really want to make them upset. I don't want to like ruin their self-esteem. I don't want them to think I'm a bad mom or a bad dad, right? So this is like, I'm going to kind of let them rule the roost. And I'm also going to really attend to all of their emotions. So it's just, what do you need from me? Because you're just crying right now, and I just want to make you happy. That's a little bit of like permissive parenting. Maybe it's a lack of boundaries in some cases. And then uninvolved parenting would be like, I'm just not involved. Like, whatever, do that. There's not a lot of nurturing going on. There's not a lot of expectations, lack of guidance and support. Just literally what it says. I'm just uninvolved. And then we have authoritative parenting. I would say authoritative parenting is most aligned with maybe like how we would see God as a father or as a parent. High demand, so there are expectations, and high nurturing. So we're validating feelings, we're talking through things. There's clear expectations and rules, there's communication, there's empathy, and then, but it really values like that discipline and then that nurturing side of it. So we're going to talk a little bit more through these. But those are the parenting styles, and then, like I said, you might find that it's kind of like, oh, maybe I have a couple of these traits, or maybe I have a couple of those traits, or maybe I don't have any of them. But something for you to think about and kind of what you want that to look like going forward. So with authoritarian parenting, some of the struggles that come out of that are children don't really learn to have like moral or critical thinking because they're just told what to do. So do that, do what I say, and move on. They can't necessarily think for themselves. They can't necessarily problem solve because they're just told what to do. So just kind of thinking through how that might then come out in behavior, right? And thinking about, well, what might happen if my kid can't think critically. Strained parent-child bonds, again, because it's just do what I say, and I don't want to listen to how you feel about it. I don't want to talk about it, right? That obviously isn't going to create a strong bond with our children. And then rebellion or secretiveness, like our kids aren't going to want to come talk to us, right? Especially if punishment is involved often. Why would my children want to come tell me if there's a problem if I'm just going to punish them or get mad at them? Or if they've done something wrong, why would they want to share that with me if they think they're just going to get in trouble? And then it limits self-efficacy. And problem solving, again, children can't learn how to think critically. They can't learn how to problem solve through issues because they're just told what to do. So then it becomes, well, just tell me what to do, and I'll just do that thing. Versus, let me figure out for myself what I want to do or what the best response is. So for permissive parenting, some of the issues, right, impaired self-regulation, and I kind of just smirk it, right, at that because we're talking about the kid throwing the tantrum, right? Like he can't regulate his emotions. So sometimes when if we're a little bit more permissive, kids are just sort of emoting all over the place because there's not a lot of boundaries for how do you handle your emotions and what do we do with those emotions and when is it appropriate to throw a tantrum and when isn't appropriate to throw a tantrum. Challenging authority, because there's no boundaries set, our children just think, well, I do whatever I want. So when they go out into society, right, if we as parents who are sort of that first line of defense don't really challenge them to be held accountable or, set boundaries or whatever, then they go out into the real world, right, and they struggle because they thought, well, I can do whatever I want at home, why can't I do whatever I want here? Emotional insecurity, recognizing that setting boundaries is actually very positive for children. They really thrive in structure, and it's really something that we do actually want to give them because it creates consistency for them, and they can understand the limits. So they might walk away from a permissive parent with some emotional insecurity just because they're not sure, like, how are things going to be today? And, if I'm just ruling the roost, what next? And how do I make all of these decisions on my own? And then again, same thing, kind of like with the authoritarian, undeveloped problem solving, right? They're just kind of going through life without really struggling, and so nobody's sitting there telling them, well, wait, here's a boundary. Let's learn how to work through that. They don't really get that chance. So, I'm sorry. As far as permissive parenting goes, again, I think I kind of listed this earlier, but just lack of rules, a reluctance to say no, and then sometimes children can make pretty big decisions for themselves without, but they're not quite ready for that. That can be a sign of permissive parenting. And then also using external validation or rewards to get bribery, to get children to do things. Sometimes that can be a sign of permissive parenting. So just kind of thinking about how we use some of those tactics, and I'm not saying every tactic is wrong or there isn't a right time for a tactic, but just thinking about how we use them, how often we use them, and what that kind of looks like to our kids. And then for uninvolved parenting, again, emotional or developmental delays, right, because there's nobody there. They're just trying to get through life on their own. Academic and social difficulties, increased risk-taking behaviors. They just haven't really learned how to work through that, and there's not a lot of support in uninvolved parenting, so they're trying to figure all these things out on their own without that guidance and that encouragement from, a present parent. So I talked about authoritative parenting. I'm biased, right? Every other one had a negative bent, and this is pretty positive. But authoritative parenting, I would say, is really like that middle ground of parenting. We're taking the extremes, like authoritarian, permissive, uninvolved. We're taking those extremes and we're bringing them to the middle here. And so really with authoritative parenting, it's about wisdom, and it's about recognizing that our children are going to benefit from increased emotional intelligence and resilience, right? We're setting a boundary. We're saying, okay, here's the limit, and if you cross that line, then what we're going to do is we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about it. We're going to help you work through those emotions that maybe our children are angry because we've set a boundary. Maybe they're upset because we're unhappy that they've crossed a boundary. We're going to sit down, we're going to really talk about that. So they learn how to develop that emotional intelligence and that resilience and problem solve through that. It does create stronger bonds because, again, we're sitting down, we're talking with them, we're having these heart-to-heart conversations, and we're working through those issues. And then it really does increase self-esteem and competence because, again, children are now problem-solving, right? They're saying, okay, well, that's the boundary, so and let's say I'm upset about it, well, what do I need to do to regulate that? Or how do I work through that? Or if I don't like that boundary and there's an issue, how do I problem solve through that? So it really does help to, make children a little bit more well-rounded and to, create in them what I think are really all craving, which is we want productive members of society, we want God-fearing children, and we want children who seem really grounded in their emotions and are able to, move forward in a positive way. So again, told you we're going to kind of talk about this idea of like using the Bible as our roadmap and coming from internal to external as kind of our, guiding us. So remember that from a biblical perspective, parenting is not just about setting rules, doing what I say or anything like that, but it really is about these pieces, right? Loving our children unconditionally. This one I think is difficult for people to wrap their head around at times, because I think sometimes what happens is we see our children and we see their negative behavior, and it's like that's them. And so it can become conditional at times, and even if that is just, we don't intend for it to be, but, well, you hurt my feelings, and so I don't want to talk to you, right? And that can feel, I think, like it's conditional, because our children, well, I'm bad, mom doesn't want to talk to me. And you can kind of see that cause and effect versus, okay, so you've done something not great, and let's sit down and let's talk about why you did that, but I really want you to know that I love you for who you are, right? And even though that was a bad decision, and you're going to make more bad decisions, I still love you as a parent. So loving unconditionally, just like God loves us unconditionally. None of us are perfect, obviously, and but God telling us like, hey, I got you, right? You got Christ, and I love you, and despite the fact that you're not perfect. Obviously, praying continually, right? Again, modeling that for our kids, helping them learn how maybe they can pray too for things that, if they're in need or if they're struggling, and using that even as a coping mechanism. And then teaching faithfully. So again, sharing God's word, but then also teaching them through these issues that maybe they're going through, or these behaviors, right? Versus sometimes I think we as parents, because we do get frustrated or we're tired, or name whatever emotion you want to put in there, it becomes just, okay, here's a punishment, or just whatever, go off, but really taking the time to teach them through those things, and then guiding wisely, again, providing boundaries, finding the authority piece, but then the grace piece, and bringing those together. All right, practical tools and strategies. So hopefully you're like, this is what I came for, some tools to use. So 4 tools that we're going to talk about: setting clear expectations and rules, consistent follow-through, connection before and after, and praise desired behavior. So I'm going to break these down for you, and we're going to talk through them. All right, so setting clear expectations and rules. I would say that, when people come in to see me and they're struggling in these ways, I think sometimes it feels like we'll say something like, well, just don't be bad. Like, just be good. Be nice. Kind of some of these things. And I think sometimes that can get really muddled, or it can be too broad, or like our kids don't always maybe understand what that means. And so really thinking about, how do we want to set clear expectations and rules? And so rules really need to be simple, and they need to be specific. So, rather than, hey, go clean your room, put your toys in that bin, put your clothes in the hamper, put your books on the shelf, right? Clear and specific. Because when I say to my son, for example, go clean your room, he might think that means something completely different, and oftentimes he does, and I go in there and I'm like, yeah, that's not clean. And he's like, yeah, I did it. I cleaned, right? Because we have differing perspectives and differing definitions of what that means. And so being able to say, like, what is that definition? What does that really mean? It is really important to explain the why behind why we do something. So we talked about the authoritarian parent who is kind of like, just do it my way or the highway. Oftentimes, right, I said that was for control and conformity. So in this way, explaining the why, not only does it help our children understand and creates that internal drive to want to do better, want to obey, but it also helps children understand, or helps us to understand that, like what is the purpose of this? And this actually does have a purpose. Because I think sometimes we as parents, too, can sort of just throw stuff out there, like, well, I just don't want you to do that. Well, why don't you want me to do that? Because I just don't, right? And I don't know if you guys have ever done that or said that or heard that, but I think that can definitely happen. And so when we sit down and we really break down, well, why is this a rule in my home? Why is this a rule for you? Not only do our children benefit from understanding, because then, right, they get to say, okay, I understand that Mom doesn't want me to run out into the road because she doesn't want me to get hurt, is different from just don't do that. Well, why would I listen to you? Like, it looks fine, you know. But then it also helps us really understand, is the rule something that is important? Is the rule necessary? Is it really something that we need to be imposing on our children? Posting visual reminders can be really helpful, especially if you have younger children, right? Being able to say, like, here's the expectation, here's the rules. I know, you know, like with my older daughter, sometimes there's a lot of like, well, I forgot. You know, whether that's real or an excuse, you know, if it's up there, everybody can see it, then there's no excuse at that point. Obviously, reviewing and adjusting rules as children grow, right? As they become more independent, things are going to change. And so making sure that we are saying, like, okay, well, you know, if the curfew for my 16-year-old was 10, but my 18-year-old, maybe now it's midnight, right? Recognizing that my 18-year-old is saying, well, all my friends are out till midnight, you want me to come home at 10, why? That's what you're going to get, why? You know, recognizing how children shift and grow and change, and our rules need to kind of do the same thing as well. And then, of course, ensuring that rules reflect your values and God's character, right? We don't want to instill rules that, again, just for rules' sake, but do they align with your values? Are they something that, where you could really sit down with your child and say, this is really important to us because, fill in the blank, and this is kind of what God says about that, and why it's important that we follow that rule. Do you guys have any questions about that tool or implementing it? Yeah?
I have 5, and I'm an empty nester now, but one of the things that we noticed was we did something with the first child, didn't work. So you do something with the third child, but the third child remembered what you did with the first child. And so why does he get to do that? Because you're a terrible parent. I'm like, okay, well, like my daughter, she would always tell me what I was doing wrong, and then if she was a parent, what she would do right.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, okay, thanks, Lauren. So that was awful.
It's the modeling, right?
Yeah, and it's really awful to see the 4 parenting styles and see how you sneak into the bad ones.
Yeah, yes.
And you're like, yeah, I didn't do that.
It happens. I know. I get it.
You get tired.
Yeah. For sure. And I think you bring up a good point, though, right? Like, you have different personalities in your children. They're going to do different things. They're going to push limits in different ways. I heard that, too, though, where you get like, oh, I'm the kid who saw my sibling do something bad, so then I'm over here trying to do something really, really good, and how that also shapes, right? And how we parent the older child versus the younger child. And, yeah, it gets tough. And I think when we come to things like this tool, like clear expectations and rules, what some of that can do is really take that pressure off too, right? Because even though we're going to have to attend to different personalities in our children and different emotions in our children, the reality of it is the expectations and the rules probably should be pretty consistent across the board. Now, you know, again, you have an older child and a younger child, you might have a different type of rule, but you still might have like a curfew, right? The times might be different, and you can explain that, right? You could say, well, when you turn 18, you get to come home at midnight. And I do that a lot with my children too. Like, my son's like, why can't I have X, Y, Z? And I'm like, because you're 12. That's why. And because they're this age, you know. So kind of, you know, but across the board, there should be some consistency and some expectation in that. Any other questions or concerns? Yeah.
Might not belong here, and we can talk later, but what... it's not really the kid's fault, but what if the 2 parents aren't
aligned.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really, really
Or
good
how do you more get there when it almost seems like not all of the time, but sometimes it seems like we are on very opposite ends of things. So how can we, and that might not be here, I mean, we can talk about it later, it's fine too.
No, I get that. No, I appreciate it. I think it's a really great question, and I really do appreciate it. And I think we can talk more later too, but what I would say in this moment is finding the common good. Like, what is the goal? What is the expectation, right? And kind of coming together and deciding that. And we're going to talk later about family mission statements, so it might fit in a little bit there. But yeah, maybe we can talk a little bit more. Thank you. Anything else? No? Sounds okay? All right. Okay, so tool number 2, consistent follow-through. Okay, so you've set your expectations, yeah, and your rules, right? You will be home at midnight, right? That is the rule, that is the expectation. And what happens when? Because it's going to be when, right? Like, no child is ever going to do anything perfectly. We almost have to reframe our whole perspective on parenting to be like, oh yeah, when my kid's going to mess up. I'm just waiting for it to happen, because we mess up. So we have to really understand that. We have to really take this and say, like, I need to be prepared because that will be happening. So consistent follow through. So again, why children feel secure when there's a boundary, when we're following through on a consequence, for example, building respect for your authority, because your word is now your bond, right? Like, I said, if you do this, this will happen, and I followed through on that. Now my child knows, like, oh, mom's going to follow through on that, right? And the more I do it, the more they realize, like, mom's going to follow through on that. Teaches cause and effect, right? If you do this, then this happens. And then it can help with just those testing behaviors. Kind of interestingly, and maybe you guys have experienced this or have heard of this, but like, those parents who count down? 1, 2, or 2, 3, 2, 1? Yeah. The kid, I'm assuming, doesn't do anything until you get to whatever's after 1, right? Because they know, well, when mom gets to, 0.5, I probably should start doing something, right? Or how many times will they go, mom, dad, mom, dad, mom, dad, mom, dad, and you're like, what? Right? Because they know that if I just keep doing this, one of them is going to respond to me, right? So there's a lot of, call it conditioning that goes on, right? Conditioning is that idea that something happens enough and I respond to it enough that it just kind of becomes automatic, and that happens, right? And so just for like a practical example, how many of you have that dinging thing in your car for the seatbelt? You have that, right? It's so annoying. I just hate it. I think they know we hate it, and they just make it worse in every car. You know why? Because I'm going to put my seatbelt on. I want that dinging to stop. But what I've learned in my car is if I wait long enough, it will. So if I just wait long enough, it will stop. I just have to get through that. So, right, but I learned that, right? So this idea of learned behavior. So if I as a parent follow through on my word, my kids learn that. They learn that mom's following through. I'm not really going to get away with that. But if I am inconsistent, they learn that too. And then they learn how to push me in a way, right, that becomes what they want. They can essentially manipulate me into doing what they want if they get loud enough, if they get annoying enough, if they wait long enough, if I'm in a good mood, right? They know, and they learn those things about us. So consistent follow-through is super important. So thinking about how do we follow through more consistently, only make promises you can keep. I don't know about you guys, but you've probably seen it on TV, or maybe you've done it, but you will never leave the house again. Yeah, no, we can't follow through on that, right? We call that an empty threat, right? I can't possibly never let my child leave the house again, right? But then they learn that, right? They learn, okay, mom makes empty threats, mom makes these big, threats that she is never really going to keep. And so I just have to wait that out. Giving warnings before consequences, right? So, hey, you're kind of verging on doing something that's not great here. Remember, if you cross this boundary, here's the consequence, right? Reminding our children that, and I will follow through if you don't do what I ask you to do. So reminding them of that. Following through calmly and not in anger. Once we cross the line between being calm and being angry, we've lost the battle. Our children will just tag onto that, and they know it. They are such smart little beings. Once I get angry, then I've lost all control, and now it just becomes punishment. It becomes just either do what I say, and I'm going to punish you, or just go away. I'm so mad right now, I just can't even deal with it. Just do whatever you want, right? And again, lack of consistency. Our kids learn that about us. If I push mom to just get angry, I got a 50-50 chance that I'll get to do what I want, right? Obviously, consistency, there you go, but between parents and caregivers, right? Being on the same page, that helps because then it creates that sense of unity and it creates that sense of, okay, if I go to mom and she says no, and I go to dad, he's going to say no, right? And we're going to follow through on that versus my kids go to my husband and he says no, they usually come to me. And then we might have a whole miscommunication going on. And then, of course, adjusting consequences to fit the situation, but always following through. So again, that's sort of that grace piece that comes in, right? And that where we need to adjust. It doesn't have to be super rigid all the time. It doesn't even necessarily have to be the same. It's easier if it's the same consequence. Like if I sit down with my children and I say, okay, well, if you stay out past curfew, what is an okay consequence for us here? Usually my child will pick the lesser of the two that I might give them, right? The easier one. But in any case, it should be consistent and I should always follow through, but maybe there's an extenuating circumstance or something that kind of comes through where I say, well, let me adjust that a little bit. So having some options in that, but consistently following through is really important. All right, so again, we've got setting our rules and expectations, we're following through, which means we've delivered a consequence, right? We've disciplined, and now we want to talk about connection with our children. Going back to earlier when we talked about loving unconditionally, this is this concept here. Really want our kids to understand that we do love them, and that's why we're implementing these rules, and that's why we're implementing these consequences or this discipline. Again, we don't want our kids to think that we're just out to control them. And likewise, from a biblical perspective, God isn't just out to control us. God doesn't set forth commandments and ask us to do things because he just wants to say, I just want to control you. He wants us to come to him and freely come to him and love him. And because he loves us, right? So that example I used earlier, if you don't want your kids to run into the street because you don't want them to get hurt, that's out of love, right? That's not just because you want to have control over them. So really recognizing that we want to deliver rules, expectations, follow through, discipline with love. And that's really where everything should flow. It should flow from love. Despite the fact that maybe we get angry or frustrated. But hopefully this will help to tamp that down a little bit. So connecting with our children, getting down on their eye level, right? Getting right here versus I'm looking down on them. It just shows that we're coming down together. I'm trying to understand them and they can understand me. I cannot express enough how important it is to stay calm, right? So one thing that we see when children come into counseling, for example, is if they're just all over the place and just really struggling, it can be a sign that their parents are also emotionally dysregulated or really struggle to stay grounded emotionally. Remember, children get from us what they do oftentimes, right? So the more calm we can stay, the more objective we can stay in that way, using a gentle tone really helps kids to also ground themselves. So I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but your child falls down and they look at you, and they're kind of like, how's mom and dad going to respond, right? And if we have a parent who's like, oh my gosh, right? And they, bah, right? Yes, exactly. Or if we have a parent who walks over and is like, it's okay, you're going to be fine, let's get up, right? And you kind of can see them, reflect that, right? So this notion is that we want to be calm too, because the more calm we are, the more calm they're going to be. Acknowledging their feelings, validating their emotions, right? I can see you're really upset. And that's okay. I tell my son gets mad at me sometimes for whatever, and I say to him, that's fine. You can be mad at me. Sure. Let's talk about why you're mad, and let's talk about what we can do next time. So it's okay. It's like our kids are independent beings too, right? They have their own emotions, their own feelings, and they're entitled to those as well, just as we are entitled to ours. So, it's okay. Just acknowledge it. Looks like you're upset right now. Seems like you're angry. Showing empathy. It's hard when things don't go our way. We get that. We understand that. It is hard when things don't go our way, even as adults, right? Something happens and we're just, so frustrating. And it is. It is. Reminding them that you love them, right? I love you. That's why we need to talk about this. Again, I tell my kids sometimes, I say, if I didn't love you, I wouldn't care. I would just, whatever, right? Because I love them so much that I do care. And I really want them to be, productive members of society and God-fearing beings. And so, we've got to implement those consequences. So that's, before, right? So before we've delivered a consequence, and then afterward, what are we going to do? Offering comfort and reassurance, right? Like, yeah, I know that's tough. That's a tough consequence. I get that. Reaffirming your love for them and their self-worth. Like, just because we made a bad decision doesn't make you a horrible person, right? Just because we made a bad decision doesn't mean I don't love you. Helping them process what happened. So again, talking through that with them, helping them understand, what really happened in this situation. What are we going to do next time? Let's talk about maybe why we made that decision. Looking for ways to restore and rebuild. Let's bring our relationship back together, right? Just like we do with God, right? In forgiveness, and we reconcile in that, and especially, after we repent and things like that. So looking for that restoration and that reconciliation. And then, of course, praying together is always a great strategy as well, to be able to come together and pray through some of those things. All right, so the last tool in this section is praise desired behaviors. I think people probably do this pretty often, but I've encountered people who do struggle to praise their children. I think they think it might be like overdoing it or affirming something that they shouldn't be affirming. So like sometimes parents will say, well, yeah, that's the expectation. Why should I thank them? Or why should I praise them for doing the expectation, doing what I expected of them? And the example I always use is, if you go to a restaurant, do you thank your waiter or your waitress? Probably, right? They bring you your food. Well, but you expected them to bring you your food. And I always say, well, why would you thank them if that's the expectation, right? Like, why can't we do that for our children too, right? And so sometimes we set these expectations, and I think we get bogged down in that idea of like, well, that's just what it is. Why do you need to be praised for that? But it is really important. Praise, what it does is it shapes behavior. Praise is very good at shaping behavior. Everybody likes to hear good things. I would imagine you guys yourselves love to hear good things, right? If somebody said, "Oh, that was awesome, you did great," that makes me feel good, right? And so it really works on kids because they're younger and they really just benefit from that. Oh, mom's saying something good about me. Dad's proud of me. Kids tend to crave things like that, and we can talk through that with our kids about external validation, and that's a whole nother presentation for another time, but. Praises can be really valuable and useful. Praising their character, right? The traits about them that make them who they are, if they're kind, if they're honest, if they can persevere, if they're generous. Effort over outcome is vital. Outcome is important, right? Like getting good grades or, passing your driver's test or whatever, right? Those are outcomes. Those are really important things. But recognizing that just because our kid doesn't hit the mark doesn't take away from who they are or even the effort they put in. Sometimes our kids are really, for example, academic and they get good grades really easily, and then maybe other times, we have another child maybe who doesn't and has to work a lot harder. That shouldn't shift how we praise them or how we look at the effort that they've put into it. Praising good choices. I noticed, like, for example, I noticed you shared your toy without being asked, right? Finding the good things that they're doing, actively looking for those things. And then what does praising effectively look like? Being specific, not just, hey, you did a great job today, right? But in this example, you showed kindness when you helped your sister, right? So something very specific and say, yeah, I'm going to tell you how great you did at that. Praise works really well when it's immediate and close to the behavior, so it doesn't like wear off, right? So if my kid does something at 9 a.m. and I'm telling them at 9 p.m., right? The effect may not be as great. So try to make it as close to the behavior as possible, but doesn't mean that we can't praise them if we heard about something or if we forgot and we want to come back to it. Obviously, being genuine, right? Not just like, oh yeah, good job, woo, but I really appreciated that. And you're really expressing that emotion to them. And then again, focusing on the behavior and not just the child, right? Separating this notion of like, oh, I appreciate that you showed good behavior today versus like in this case, you're so smart. Because what that then does is it attaches the behavior to the child, which then can have that same sense of worth issue, right? Oh, well, if I'm smart, then mom's happy with me if I'm smart. So if I'm not smart today, mom won't be happy with me, right? But being able to say, that was a good choice, that choice was good, and even if you didn't make that good choice, I would still love you, that's what that's talking about. And so separating our behavior from our children's worth and their value as humans on the earth. All right. Yeah.
I coached soccer for 12 years. That was already like almost a decade ago. We gave out a participation trophy at the end of every one of the 24 seasons that I coached. And I only had one mom out of all those seasons who refused to let her child get one. Because she said, did we win? And I said, well, we don't really have playoffs, ma'am. This is not, well, my kid's not getting one. And the kid seemed okay. I didn't follow up with him 10 years later. But I wonder if our culture, I don't know. I look at the misery in our culture, and I'm not questioning anything that you said. I think that you have to praise children. But if you could just speak to that.
The over-affirmation. I think kind of you're speaking a little bit to what I said earlier about like permissive parenting, where it's just like that highly nurtured, like, it's fine, you didn't really try, but like, good job anyway, and that I'm just gonna validate you all over the place, right? I think, again, like you're saying, I think praise has a place in what we're doing, and this is, when we're talking about shaping behavior, praise is really important in that. So if I want to, if my child lashes out and hits somebody over and over, and I don't want them to do that, and I notice that they didn't do that, and I say, hey, I noticed that you didn't hit that kid when you got upset. Great job. That is to shift behavior versus the over-affirmation that you're talking about, which is like, oh, everything you do is great, and you've always tried really hard. And while that might be true, I think your point is that if it's not warranted, it can kind of cause some of this disconnect, in our society. And so, so using praise as a reinforcement and a way to shift behavior versus kind of that permissive type parenting of, I'm just going to kind of attend to you all the time and tell you how great you are all the time. Because remember, praise desired behaviors goes with, administering discipline too. So that would be my assumption, is that we're kind of looking, when you talk about society, is we're looking more at that, like a lack of accountability and a lack of authority. Is that a fair assessment? Yeah, but I get what you're saying, and I think that can be, right, because we don't want to be on either extreme. We don't want to never, give our children praise, right? Because that can be an issue as well. Our kids then always just think they're doing everything wrong and they can't do anything right, and there's a perfectionistic and perspective, anxiety that comes out of that. But then on the other end, we can over affirm, and you kind of see what happens with that as well. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Any other thoughts or questions about the tools or that part of it? Yeah.
We have a few families just over the course of my ministry who, not that they failed, but there's horrible discipline by the time they reach high school. Mm-hmm. And I haven't told them it's too late. It's kind of too late though, isn't it? By the time they're in high school.
Well, go ahead.
And then they feel horribly guilty. Parenting can be a horrible guilt trip.
That's true.
And obviously there's forgiveness in Jesus for anything.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone's ever so far gone that we can't help them. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be way harder than you've got a 2-year-old versus the 15-year-old.
Right.
That's really hard.
Yeah.
To change some of those behaviors. And everything that you say is good and true, but I just wonder, by that point you're like, yeah, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like I've had parents send their kids off to like a military school.
Oh, sure.
And I talked to a counselor and said that's a great idea. Because the dad and the son fought physically. And the counselor said the best thing would be for the child to leave.
Yeah.
And that's so extreme, Amanda.
Yeah. Well, I think you bring up a good point, right? The longer we parent a certain way, obviously the more ingrained it becomes. But even in that case where you're having these physical altercations, I think we as the parents, like we're really the ones in control, right? So what that tells me is that perhaps that father wasn't totally in control, right? There's not a lot of emotional control going on. We're lashing out. We're letting our children's behavior get to us, and then we're acting in a way that is just not helpful, is not functional. And so not to say that it doesn't feel like we want to do that sometimes, like lash out or get upset or angry, but we're the adult, right? So in some ways we need to step back and say, like, what do I have going on with me where I need to learn how to control myself? Because remember, we talked about that today, that our children, not only do they model us, but they feed off our emotions. So if I'm dysregulated, they're most likely going to be dysregulated. And I know in my household, for example, if I'm having a down day, like it like ripples through the whole house. Like you can feel it, right? So that doesn't mean I should be happy all the time, but my point is that you just, right, our families, they feed off of us, right, off of our energy. And so recognizing that, okay, what do I need to do to stay in control? And then the other thing I would say is it would be very difficult, I think, to reshape that behavior, but my guess would be that it probably needs to come back to the relationship. The relationship sounds like has been broken in some way, and I think as parents, sometimes we need to step back. And I'm not talking about extreme cases. There are extreme cases, and kids could benefit from therapy too. We could benefit from family therapy. Parents can benefit from therapy, but I think we need to step back as parents and say, how do I need to fix this relationship with my child? Because my kid isn't going to come to me and say, I want to fix my relationship with you. They barely know their own emotions. You know what I mean? And so I think as parents, sometimes we really just need to take a step back and evaluate, what's really going on here. And in fact, am I actually doing what I think am I actually doing what I think I'm doing well? Like, it's okay to take stock of what we're doing and assess what we're doing. And so, yeah, I think it would be really difficult to reshape that behavior, but I would wonder if they were able to step back and say, let me rebuild this relationship from the ground up versus getting mad all the time or lashing out. And I think the other thing to understand, too, is our kids are going to lash out. They're going to be. They can, like I said, they can barely recognize their own emotions sometimes, especially developmentally, like where they are developmentally. And so really understanding that, I need to help my child figure out what's going on inside of them. And to do that, I have to, one, take care of myself, right? I have to acknowledge what's going on inside of me as well. And I have to work through anything that might be coming up. And two, I need to be able to sit down with them and say, okay, let's talk about how we can build this relationship in a way that, is going to be better for both of us. and move forward. So I don't think it's a totally lost cause, but yeah, I think there'd be a lot of work to be done. And I always encourage counseling. I'm a little biased, though. So thank you, though. I appreciate you bringing that up. Anything else? Questions, comments, concerns about this section, or anything else so far?
Like, not me. My
Throwing?
child.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Okay.
Yeah. And you were talking about like the 1, 2, 3 thing, or the sitting in the chair, or the this and the that. And yes, I know I'm probably not consistent like I should be, but if I am more consistent with one of the, we're going to take the car away, or we're going to sit in the chair, or we're going to do this, that will improve. Or what do you do about just this throwing and it seems like nothing works?
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense. Yeah. I guess I'd have to maybe know a little bit more, like, what have you tried?
Taking his toys away, popping him, setting him down, talking to him about it.
I told her to read Dr. Becky Bailey.
Okay, so you've tried a lot of things, and it sounds like none of them have been beneficial or have changed the behavior, is what I hear you saying. Okay. I would be curious to know if it happens at certain times, if there's a pattern of it happening.
Sometimes I think so. I mean, sometimes I think it's when he's mad, but not all of the time.
Okay.
Sometimes he's just sitting there rolling the cars on the floor and it's like, boom.
Okay.
Like he did it to me just one day, like I was giving him a hug and like hugged and then just like boom across the face.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
if
it's
that
not,
helped,
like it's not food or, but it's objects. His bears, his baby, his trucks, his cars, like.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, maybe if I'm more consistent with something.
Right. Yeah. And maybe something toward the end of today we can chat a little bit more about. But yeah, I would have to probably know a little bit more about what your response is. Because, sometimes kids like to get a rise out of us, right? They'll do things they want to see. And when we talk about behavior, too, especially like shaping behavior, one of the important things to remember is that that's why like being calm is so important, because anytime we show an emotion, our children tend to like grab onto that. So, it's funny when mom gets upset. So I'm going to do the thing that makes it funny when mom gets upset, right? But if mom doesn't react to the behavior, guess what? Now I don't get what I want out of mom. And so throwing that truck or whatever doesn't elicit the same response. And I don't get the same benefit from it. So from a behavioral perspective, and think about like how you respond and kind of maybe what might be going on there. And kind of, you said it's a girl, your daughter, or boy, son, how he responds. Yeah. And that might be some of it too, right? Is that there's just sort of, that's just a part of a personality, right? And so some of that might be redirection. We're going to talk about that a little bit here in discipline, but some of that might be redirection too. So thank you, though, and we'll keep that in mind as we go through. Anything else? Good. All right. Okay, so I put one of these in the back of your packet. This is more for like older kids and adults, but it's the feelings wheel. You can also find like an interactive version on feelingswheel.com, but it just helps you to identify more than basic emotions, so happy, sad, angry, whatever. It'll branch out a little bit, and you can kind of take a look at that. But it gives language to what you're feeling. If I use this like in session, for example, sometimes I'll go through it and I'll ask somebody to pick an emotion, and I'll say, well, do you know what that feels like? Do you know what that means? Sometimes people just don't have language for their emotions. So when we as parents are reacting to our children, we might just think, well, I'm angry. But there actually might be a lot of underlying emotions to that. And, maybe really I'm just hurt, or maybe I'm feeling disrespected, or maybe I'm feeling XYZ. And so this can really help, older children, teens and up, and then us as parents and adults to just kind of give language around what we're feeling and how to then communicate that in a little bit of a better way. And then this is also in the back of your packet. This is for the littler children. So, right, they can kind of pick an emoji face. Helps, again, with communication, right? So, it seems like you're angry. Is that true? You can kind of work through that with them, or you can kind of go through these with your kids. Ask them, do they know what that feels like? Do they know what that means? And then it gives them the language too, so they can more accurately tell you what's going on. And that helps to just kind of, obviously for communication, for the relationship. And then it helps you to understand too, so you're not like, oh, you're just acting out, right? Maybe something really is going on. Maybe they're scared of something and then they're having a behavioral response to that, versus, well, you're just being bad, or you're just disobeying me. Okay, so this is for us as parents, and this is where you might benefit, like when you're talking about, like, I don't know what's going on, this may help you kind of, figure that out a little bit more and just understand a little bit better. But I really would encourage some self-reflection, not just like, what is it that I'm doing, but what are the thoughts that are going through your head when your child misbehaves? What are your responses? How do you automatically respond? We all have like thoughts that pop in our head throughout the day, or we all have automatic responses, right? It's like the seatbelt thing, right? You hear the ding, I put the seatbelt on, that's an automatic response. Right? We all have emotions that crop up. So I would encourage you just to take some time throughout the day and think about a situation where your child misbehaved, and then really think about, well, how did I really feel in that time? Or what kind of thoughts were going through my head, or how did I respond to that? And then obviously you can journal through that. So documenting some triggers, what went well, what didn't go so great, what would you like to change? But sitting down and really taking the time to assess can, help with bringing awareness and gaining insight into what's really going on. Intentional observation with your child. So really watch their behaviors. What patterns do you notice? What works from a parenting perspective, what doesn't really work from a parenting perspective. I think sometimes we just get so caught up in parenting, we get so caught up in life that we're just kind of doing, and we're like, well, this is what I've done all along, so I'm just going to do that thing, and maybe it works sometimes, maybe it doesn't, maybe, we're just kind of like, I just got to move on. So let's really think about what is actually going on, and being very intentional about what we're doing and what we're thinking, and, what we want to do going forward. Really important when we're observing, when we're reflecting, when we're journaling, those kind of things. Not to have a lot of judgment around that. The goal of like tasks like this isn't to say, oh, I'm doing that so poorly, or, gosh, I'm terrible at that, or whatever. But more objectively, what am I doing now? What's going well? What isn't? So if you engage in those things, I would just encourage kind of more of that objective perspective. And then setting small goals. So obviously, if you leave here today, kind of asking yourself, like, okay, what's one thing that I want to implement tomorrow or tonight? Or what's one thing I would like to see change within over the next week? Or what do I want to, how do I want to do that differently? So those are maybe some ways, if you're feeling, confused, if you're feeling like you're just struggling, just take some time to step back and reflect a little bit. All right, so now we're going to talk about some discipline. So remember, we talked about that authoritative parent, that's love and authority, right? We contrasted that with authoritarian, which is all authority, and the permissive, which is just all attending and nurturing without, any expectations. So really, Hebrews 12 just reminds us that nobody likes to be disciplined. It really doesn't feel good, but at the end of the day, it is really important that we do it because, right, we grow out of that. And remember that, too, is that we as human beings, whether we're adults or children or whatever, we grow out of discomfort. And so I can't grow and problem solve if I'm never uncomfortable. And so it's okay to make our children uncomfortable in a loving and a safe way. And it's okay for me to be uncomfortable as a parent as well. And so just remembering that discipline is okay, and it can be done in a way out of love, and that actually is purposeful rather than just, for discipline's sake. All right, so just want you to think about how do you currently discipline? And so if anybody's willing to share, that would be awesome. It doesn't have to be necessarily one of these, but how do you typically discipline? What do you do?
I don't know. I'm a talker. I talk.
Okay.
There's not necessarily I don't know. I guess when we were kids, it was like, oh, you're grounded from going to a friend's house or whatever. But like, that doesn't apply to my children. I don't get it. I mean,
Sure.
like this weekend, their devices are taken. Like I said, they just get them Friday, Saturday. That's one of our main ones, but we talk more than anything about like if the 6-year-old if she's screaming, like, okay, we sit down and we talk about it. There's not necessarily a discipline that she gets for screaming.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
From
It's really hard to be on the same page.
Yeah.
And at different times, we were better at it. And some days we were terrible. Yeah, and I'm thankful that my kids don't hate me. And
Yeah.
In general, we try to do pre-planned. It's probably more emotional. Yeah. It's current discipline approach, man.
Yeah, it's tough, right? It's tough. Sometimes this is what we do, kind of like what you're talking about. Sometimes it can feel like, well, some days I do this one, and some days I do that one, and some days I do that one, right? Because maybe I don't know how to respond. And so, as we go through this, you kind of think about it too, and we'll see.
Here, so then it makes me inconsistent with things.
Yeah.
And I feel like nothing works. So
Right.
then I try to change things up, and I still feel like nothing works.
Sure. Yes. No, I get that.
And when I do hold my ground, then I get literally like screamed at for 30 minutes to an hour with very difficulty like calming back down.
The regulating. Well, I think that you've probably given quite a nugget of information there, right? Like when I follow through, I get this backlash. So my guess would be is you don't want to hear that, right? So I don't want to hear that. So, but we could talk about, right? Well, how do I handle that piece of it?
Because I have been all over the place, and as far as discipline goes, have probably been a little more on the permissive side. So I'm trying to shift, and I'm kind of in the shift.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel great.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
It's not.
Well, I'll validate that for you because it is always harder to set boundaries than it is to loosen them, right? And so when we talk about behavior from a very just a behavioral perspective, the idea that whenever I set a boundary, there's going to be sort of this big crescendo of poor behavior, right? Because I'm saying, no, you can't do that. And my child is like, what do you mean I can't do that? I could do that yesterday and the day before and the day before, and now I can't. And it's this, And so that's where the consistency comes in, because once they adapt to, okay, mom is going to do the same thing and she's going to be consistent, right? Then that behavior calms down, or they say, oh, that's not working anymore. But you will see a big spike in poor behavior to try to get your attention, to try to break you down. Yeah, so it doesn't surprise me. What you're saying doesn't surprise me, and yeah. But it is hard. It is hard. You know, we don't want to deal with some of those things. So like emotionally, it's very difficult.
Can you, with the biblical principles, like I don't think corporal punishment is wrong. I don't think it's always good either. Mm-hmm. But I have met parents who say that is terrible. You should never use corporal punishment. Mm-hmm. Would you say it's always? I mean, you shouldn't speak in absolutes ever, Amanda.
Yeah, I would probably say that, you know, it's hard for me to say if it's, just because it's very dependent on family styles and relationships. And, you know, I think a lot of it probably depends on how strong the relationships are and what that discipline kind of looks like. And is it a punishment versus, and we're going to talk about punishment versus discipline. You know, so, yeah, it'd probably be hard for me to speak to it directly just because I feel like a topic like that is so personal within a family, but maybe as we go through this, we'll have a better view of some of that, but yeah, and I think too, like what the purpose is, but what is the intention? Or that is the purpose, but like, what does it do? How does your child respond, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, are they, sitting in fear of you because we're spanking them, or is it actually shifting the behavior in a way that is meaningful? Does that kind of make sense what I'm saying? So we'll kind of take a look at some of these concepts and we'll see. Okay. So before we jump in to punishment and discipline, just remembering that we don't want to, provoke our children to anger. So the way I kind of read this is we don't want to set our kids up for failure, essentially. We don't want to purposely, and we don't always purposely, but we even if we're not realizing it, but to exasperate them, frustrate them, or have them resent us because we've set maybe really, really high expectations that they're never going to achieve, or sometimes, I'll hear like it's like a moving goalpost, right? Like here's the expectation, and the child hits that expectation, but that's not good enough, and the goalpost moves, right? The bar goes up, or it shifts in some way. Obviously, favoritism, right? That just kids they can read that, and then they're striving for our attention and our affection. Humiliating and shaming, especially in front of others, dismissing their feelings, that'd be like invalidating their emotions. And remember, just because we validate somebody's emotions doesn't necessarily mean like we affirm their behavior, or we're, trying to say like, oh, it's okay all the time what you're doing, but just recognizing like, oh, like we said earlier, like, oh yeah, that sounds like it was hard today. Do you want to talk about that? And let's talk through that. Again, inconsistency in applying rules or consequences, criticism without balancing it with that praise that we're talking about. Failing to admit when we're wrong. I think that's one that I laugh because I'm sure I've fallen into that trap too, where my kids have said something like, well, you didn't do, or you're, whatever. And I'm like, oh gosh, like mom's never wrong. What are you talking about? But being able to admit when we're wrong is really important. That brings around those concepts of forgiveness and reconciliation and those things. We'll talk a little bit about that too. And then guilt tripping. I don't know if parents are doing that as much nowadays. I think it's, guilt tripping was pretty big in generations before, but, it's a big one. Passive aggressiveness, kind of like, oh, it'd be really nice if you would have cleaned your room, or gosh, you hurt my feelings when you did that thing, right? And like, yeah. So trying not to provoke our children, but maybe we'll talk through that. Oh, and then over-controlling decisions or activities beyond what's age appropriate. That might speak to your helicopter parenting just a little bit, right? That notion of kind of being right there. Okay, so let's talk about punishment versus discipline. Obviously, I think people use them interchangeably, right? I'm going to punish you. But we really want to remember and understand that discipline, like if we can reframe that idea, that discipline is really about teaching. It's really about like training, if you will. And so like if you hear somebody say like, oh, I'm really disciplined, right? They're just like nose to the ground, working hard, kind of getting themselves into a position to do something really well. And so it doesn't mean that it's not that we don't have consequences, because that is what discipline is, but recognizing that it is actually different from the idea of punishment. Punishment is just really focused on, kind of making the child pay for their wrongdoing. Sometimes it can be driven by our frustration, like I'm just going to punish you because I don't really have anything else to do, and I don't have any time to sit down and actually discipline you. I don't have time to sit down and teach you or to work through this with you. I'm just going to dole out a punishment, like, a spanking, for example, or go to your room, or just, now this is happening, right? And so think about punishment as like, it's not really a process, where discipline is much more of a process. Emphasizes consequences over learning. So again, discipline is about learning. We really want our children to understand why that decision wasn't a great one, versus just doling out consequences, and then it can damage relationships, versus strengthening our relationship with our children when we take the time to sit down and really talk through those things with them. When we think about loving authority, right? So firmness, consistency, and love. So we've been talking about consistency this whole time, but firmness, right? This idea that, like, this is what I say, and I'm going to follow through on that, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be harsh or mean, but the notion of, like, this is what it is. This is objectively what it is. Following through on that consistently, and then, of course, again, coming from flowing from love, right? Like, I do this because I love you, not just because I want to control you or because I'm angry with you or whatever, but everything that we're doing is loving and coming from a place of love. So some ways, age appropriately to discipline. And so for the younger kids, right, focusing on redirection. So here's a perfect example. You don't throw toys. Here's something you can throw, right? So in this case, we're not trying to, like, extinguish the throwing behavior. What we're saying is, okay, if you're going to throw something, have it be this soft toy versus this really hard car, which can hurt people. And then obviously, as we move up in age, right, we're introducing logical consequences, we're teaching empathy, we're teaching problem solving, cause and effect. And as our kids get older and start to become more independent, we're guiding them, but they're starting to make their own decisions. And we're kind of guiding them through those decisions and saying, well, what are the risks and benefits to these decisions? Like, if you were to do this, what would happen? Versus just saying, well, don't do that, or, whatever, however we want to interpret, or control what they're doing, I suppose. More consistency. Why is consistency important? I left this slide in here. It feels a little redundant, but I left it in here because this isn't just about consistency on discipline. That is really important, but also consistency in our emotions, consistency in our behaviors at home, consistency in what we're modeling, whether maybe that's from, like, in our faith life, like, am I consistent in prayer? Am I consistent in Bible study? Am I consistent in those things, right? So I left this in here just to underscore the idea that it isn't just consistency in consequence or discipline, but also in the things that we're doing at home. Remember, our kids are soaking up everything that we're doing, and they're going to be modeling everything that we're doing. So if I'm consistent, my child learns then how to regulate and be consistent as well. So again, kind of similar like we talked about before, but some practical steps when we're delivering discipline. So the misbehavior has happened. Now we have to deliver a consequence. So again, staying calm. I cannot express it enough. Staying calm. I know it's really difficult, but that is really probably the number one thing that we can do, right? The first thing we can do is got to stay calm. And even if that means that I have to take a minute. Maybe I'm not reacting immediately, but maybe I'm stepping back a second, I'm taking a deep breath, I'm like, okay, now I got to deliver this discipline. Again, we talked about connection already, so connecting with our children, right? What was it like when you did that? Maybe why did you choose to throw the toy? Why did you choose to hit me? Why did you choose to XYZ? What are you feeling in this moment? Are you trying to get my attention? Right? So really understanding that there's probably something deeper. Now, not all the time. Sometimes kids just do stuff. But there's probably something a little bit deeper going on. And so if we can connect with our kids and really kind of start to understand that from them, then it'll be a little bit easier to shape that behavior as well. Then teaching them the lesson. So why the behavior was wrong, why do we not want to follow through on that behavior, what is a better choice? Apply the consequence. Okay, so you misbehaved, you've crossed this boundary, now your devices are taken away, that's the consequence, right? We're delivering that consequence. And then restoring the relationship again, coming back around, right? I still love you, despite the fact that you've made this decision. That doesn't shake or shift how I feel about you as my child or as a human being or as a child of God, right? So really recognizing that this is a process. I think sometimes we forget that or we don't totally understand that, but it is in fact a process, and it takes time. It takes time. And so I think when we're tired or we're exasperated or we're frustrated or we're angry or whatever, I think the last thing we probably want to do is sit down and connect with our child in a way that maybe, right? Because if I'm really angry, it's going to probably be very hard for me to sit down and be like, okay, so why did we do that thing, right? I'm going to be over here just like angry and emoting, right? And so recognize that your emotions are going to happen, and that's okay too. But don't forget that if we want to shape behavior and we want to deliver loving discipline, it is in fact a process. Don't neglect the process. And also understand that, if you go home and try this today, that's awesome, and it's a great start, but it probably isn't going to shift everything overnight, right? Again, we go back to consistency. We got to keep doing it, keep doing it. Okay, so what do you guys think? We've talked about some discipline stuff. We've talked about some issues already. You've got new concepts. You've got new ideas. Can you apply anything to some of those issues that you shared earlier? Or what would you do different?
Say that again.
What would you do different? Based on what we've talked about so far, and the tools, and kind of we just talked about loving discipline and the process, what might you do differently with some of the challenges that you have as a parent?
I think one of mine is coming back at the end, whatever it was on the last slide, I think it was, coming back at the end and being like, you know what, I still love you, but we have to do this because this is your consequence, or this is the discipline that you like. I think that's something that could be worked on. I mean, we'll talk about things after. Sure. But going into depth and saying, I still love you, you're still my child, and really nailing into that one.
Sure. Cool. Yeah. What I love about what you're saying, too, is you recognize both, right? And, that's kind of what I'm getting at through this whole thing is, I love you and, or, that was a bad choice and I love you, right? It can be both. It doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be one or the other. It shouldn't be that was bad and now I don't care for you. We do still love our children through their misbehavior, but, yeah.
It's always difficult to stay calm, but I think, we do pretty good at, I'll be in the bath, and the kids will be like, da-da-da-da-da-da, and instead of getting angry and yelling, I will look at him and be like, you handle it, and, I think in that moment he knows, she is going to reach a level if I do not know how to handle this.
She's a mean one, by the way.
I'm just a bit more strict, I think. I think I'm just have, a schedule and routine and brush your teeth at 7:50 and you're laying down in your bed at 8 o'clock. And if that doesn't happen, but that's also a me thing too, because I
structure.
Schedule.
Yes. Yeah.
Except getting up in the morning.
And I recognize
I think about it, makes sense with Cora.
My anxiety and all my things is not their issues, but also I like to have, I tell them at the beginning of the week, okay, Tuesday night we have voice lessons and piano lessons, and this night we have, and even though it's the same schedule, but I like to say it to them too, not that they care, but just so they know, this is how it's going down.
Sure. So what's that like, if you don't mind me asking, to recognize, okay, so that's some of my stuff, and so maybe if that gets I'm assuming if that gets interrupted or there's an issue within that structure, you may respond emotionally.
I think that's when that's like the bedtime especially, that's when he knows like her OCD, anxiety, all the things are going up here, so I should probably just like handle this.
Sure.
And I'll say like, I need a minute. So I can recognize like, I need a minute.
Yeah.
Because if I go out there, it's going to be like, go to bed.
Yeah.
So I think that's the one good thing.
Yeah. There you go. Look at that. Awesome.
I mean, I'll occasionally raise my voice a little bit. But
Occasionally is really occasional.
I don't know, a couple weeks ago, I like shook the entire house. And, like,
Pretty upset.
yeah, I was just over going to bed. Like they just.
I think it's hard because they have always been good about like, okay, this is our schedule. The alarm goes off at 7:50. It's time to go. And I think really this school year, there's been a lot of changes. And so I think this school year has just been really like different.
Yeah.
And so we've struggled with, I mean, really bedtime is the hardest thing. And that's a more me thing than anyone. Like, I mean, like I said, it's okay.
Sure.
If you go to bed, you're going to have your full 9 hours, 10 hours of sleep, you know.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, and that, I think to your point though, that, and that's kind of the same before, like how it snowballs too, because then it's like, okay, well then if they don't get all that sleep, right, then how are they going to be tomorrow?
That's it. It's the what if questions that you can't answer. So don't ask what if questions. You know.
Yeah. But great that you're able to recognize that.
Right, for yourself, and then say like, okay, I got to step back, and I'm going to let you handle it, and but I think what you said too is really interesting. The fact that you said, I think it's this school year, and sometimes I don't know if we always take that into consideration, the shifts that our kids go through, whether it's developmentally or hormonally or whatever environmentally, that we're like, oh, maybe we need to figure out, okay, so that's different. What's going on with them, and how do we attend to that maybe in a way that feels like it's benefiting everybody? Because I think those shifts do happen, and sometimes we don't even recognize them. Maybe it's not something like, oh, something different at school, but maybe something's going on with a friend, but we don't know it, And so I think that really, again, just underscores this idea of connecting with our children, checking in with them, what's going on, how are you doing, and then because sometimes when there is, misbehavior and acting out, it can actually signal something is not going well, right? So also taking the time to just really kind of help our kids with that too, if there's something outside of the norm. But yeah.
Ever since the shift has kind of changed, a lot of it is to see like how much we will take, because they do, like we will tell the 10-year-old like, don't go in there, and then you hear hee hee hee, and then it just
You'll get in bed and literally just start singing to them.
and then it just like explodes. I mean, then you have them running back and forth and back and forth. And I'm
like,
looking,
right,
it's
time to go to bed.
8:05, and I'm like, nobody's in bed. Like,
Time to go to bed, and then they're doing wrestling moves on the couch, like.
I know it's okay. Like, let kids be kids, but also, yes, it's bedtime.
And some of that, though, I think
What you're speaking to is allowing for natural consequences as well, right? I'm not suggesting that we just let our kids stay up till midnight, but, right, if they're tired the next day, we get to attend to that. Like, oh, so you're really tired today. Why is that? And is that a good feeling? Do you like that feeling? Do you want to change that? What do we need to do to change that, right? So there is a little bit of that too, allowing those natural consequences to happen, even though you as a parent or we as parents might end up suffering a little bit in that too, right? It's like, if your child's acting up, for example, and your family's ready to go out. I've had this situation happen. We're ready to go out, and I had to stay home with my daughter. I didn't get to go. And I knew in that moment, if I was like, fine, it's fine, let's just go, that it would not be good, right? I wouldn't instill in her the boundary and the understanding. And so I had to stay home, and I had to suffer with her, And I think sometimes that really can shape our disciplining as well and how we move forward, because sometimes we don't want to have to deal with that, right? I don't necessarily want to have to stay home because my child is misbehaving and everybody else gets to go have fun and do something and my child's yelling and screaming at me, right? Or where your child is yelling and screaming at you. I don't necessarily want to deal with that. So, yeah, thank you. I think those are all good points, and I'm glad that you're able to recognize it, because, again, I think that's where it starts, is recognizing it within us. Anything else? Anything else that you've learned or that you can apply so far?
Evidently, I need to be consistent. It is overwhelming. It is exhausting there are some days that I just feel like all I do is, we don't do that. No, let's go play with this. That turns into a fit, and let's go outside. No. And it is hard to stay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It is. You are not alone in that. You are not alone in that. But it is, you're right. It's hard to stay consistent. It's hard to stay emotionally in control. And I think because we just, like you said, we get worn down. I just want to deal with it.
Basically.
Yeah. I get it. Well, hopefully, through some of this, now
Maybe hopefully you'll be able to go home and say, here's the rule, right? We don't throw cars, and then you can find a consequence to that that's applicable, and then be consistent in that. All his toys are gone. But also, too, if you're ever struggling, right, you can seek help, too. Of course, I'm going to promote myself as a counselor, but get it, seeking somebody out and talking to them, talking through those things, and not just through, help me develop discipline and consequences. That's great, too, but even the emotions that come up with that, right? And there's nothing wrong with that.
If we're really struggling.
Amanda,
yeah.
Could you, I know that for 3 of my 5, we did seek counseling for our kids, and it was a huge blessing. Could you just seek some time where, I'm frustrated, I don't know what to do. How do I know if this is something that's just normal that all parents get frustrated with, or how is it something I need help with and I should go get help with? And there's nothing wrong with me for seeking help either.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. So I always kind of say, one, it's okay just to have somebody, to tell somebody what's going on and have them tell you, oh, that sounds pretty normal, or, oh, gosh, something's going on and we need to talk through that. But what I would say is if it's causing, impairment for you, functional impairment, right? I'm struggling to connect lovingly with my child. I'm struggling to be present with my family. I'm getting depressed. I'm getting anxious. I'm just irritable all the time. I'm angry. Probably a good time to seek somebody out, So it's not necessarily just about what's happening, but it's about our responses. And so when it becomes an impairment in that way, I would say probably should go talk to somebody and see if we can get that worked out.
It was anxiety for us, and I know with one of my daughters, it was dramatic how she had skills to cope with her anxiety. And I'm happy to say there's things, I don't have any anxiety, which is not always great because I'm fairly clueless, even though my life is charming in some ways. That I don't know how to help it. I have no idea what this person's feeling. So that can be hard.
I do a lot, and I'm like, no, I don't want to do a lot right now. That makes me anxious. He's like, no, it's fine.
Yeah, that's tough.
Well, and I think if it's maybe if it's not just for you though, if you're seeing that in somebody else, right? Wow, that's out of the norm, right? Or it looks like, you're really struggling with that, or, my family member seems to be acting differently than they normally would. Those are really kind of signs and symptoms when, hey, maybe we should go talk to somebody. So if things are kind of humming along, unless it's completely dysfunctional, where you're in chaos all the time and that's your norm, that's one thing, right? And that would be obviously good to seek help for. But if you're feeling okay, things are okay, we're all doing okay, and it's working for you, then it's working for you. But if you see something kind of spike out of the ordinary, then it's always probably good to get something checked out. Yeah, thank you. All right, so our last section here is just going to talk about keeping faith at the center. Again, we've already talked about this quite a bit, but right, everything flowing from love, flowing from our faith. Remember, right, that God, or children are a gift from God. They are given to us to raise them, and even though sometimes it does feel like a burden can at sometimes, we are in fact stewards, of our children and of God, and want to parent them in a way that is God-pleasing and loving. So thinking about Christian parenting as a vocation, just like, if we have a job, right, we do that. Our purpose, our meaning, what do we want to do in life? What do we want that to look like? And parenting is in fact that as well. Again, something that's been given to us that God has provided to us and asks us to take care of the beings he has given us, and raise them in a way that he would want us to raise them. So how do we want to model faith in our lives, right? So again, talking through our faith with our families, praying, consistently, modeling forgiveness and grace. I think that's a big one too, because our children often can struggle to forgive or to extend grace. I know that sometimes mine have struggled with that. Like, well, why would I want to forgive them when they're mean to me? That's not an abnormal thought process for a child, because they're still developing their emotional intelligence, right? And so when we model those things, though, when we're able to say to them, like, you're forgiven, I forgive you for, misbehaving, they're more likely to pass that forward as well. And then something like service to others, right? When we're helping others, when we're involved in our communities and things like that, our kids see that, right? And that helps to then extend a love for other people. So maybe rather than going internally, I want to throw that car today, or I want to do this bad thing, or I want to be selfish, it now becomes I want to help other people. I want to extend my love and, my help to other people. So just some things that you can do to help build in these faith exercises, right? Morning devotions, worship, gratitude, evening reflections. I think gratitude is a big one. I don't know how much we talk about that. I think it's happening more in our society. It's becoming more of a buzzword, I think, but I don't know how often we stop and just really thank God for the things that we have and the things that are good in our life. I think as a society, we can tend to shift toward the negative. And it's easier to be negative, right? It's just easier to feel upset or angry, easier to criticize, easier to compare and to, point fingers. But, so I think gratitude is kind of a big one, sitting down and teaching our kids, well, what went well today? Asking our kids that, having conversations about what has God done for you today? That's really good, and helping them understand that, oh yeah, God is actually influencing my life and he's working in my life. And then you have even a better way to explain to them when you deliver discipline or when you shape behavior, right? Remember when we talked about how loving God is? How do we show our love for God, right? Is it through this behavior or is it through this behavior, right? So then you can really talk through those things and kind of use that to help just reframe for them, going forward with more functional and better behavior. All right. Oh, I said that one was the last one. I lied. Sorry. This is the last one. Family mission and lifelong journey. All right. So in your packet at the end, toward the end, you have like a sheet where you can write your family mission statement. What this really does is it just it helps to set the tone for your family. Okay, it's your roadmap, it's your guide, it's what are you really trying to express in your family. And so it helps to clarify your values for your family and your identity as your family, right? And we're not all going to have the same values. We're not all going to prioritize the same things. So this kind of helps with that too. And it also helps with I think sometimes we think oh, I should value that, or I should value this, or I should do this, or whatever. We get into those shoulds a lot. What this will help do also is kind of break down, get rid of the shoulds and just say, well, what is it that we really appreciate? What do we really prioritize? What do we really want the world to see from our family? Fostering unity and alignment. So again, maybe speaking to, coming together, finding that common ground, right? What is it that we really want to see happen? And sometimes when we are aligned in goals and missions and visions, we might have different ways to get there, but at least we can say, okay, we're trying to reach the same place, and let's talk about how we can compromise and do that in a way that benefits all of us. And then building the lasting legacy, right? This is what we want our kids to take forward. We want to instill these things in them. We want them to, again, be God-fearing human beings, productive members of society, and, really, I'm just making an assumption, but loving the people around them, right? We don't want to raise just miserable human beings. That's my guess. Oh, sorry. Okay. So creating your family mission. So again, same types of stuff, reflecting on your core values, write your statement. You don't have to do this now because I think it would be really important to go home, sit down, talk through it. But if your kids are old enough, you can definitely include them too. What do they think? These are really good questions too. And you could even do it with your 2-year-old and just kind of see what some of the words that come up. But kind of thinking well, what do you think of our family? What would you like to see our family do more of? What do you think we value? That can sometimes just be a real eye-opener too, because they might say something way over here and you're like, oh, really? That's what you thought? And kind of then being able to come together and talk through that a little bit. But yeah, if you do these with your families, and but you have the worksheet that you can write through it. These are just some samples, just to kind of give you an idea of maybe what you would like it to sound like, and then you kind of insert here. But the Johnson family exists to love God wholeheartedly, serve others joyfully, and grow in wisdom together. We will create a home filled with grace, laughter, and faith. We are the Martinez family, chosen by God to be his light in our community. We commit to treating each person with dignity, sharing our resources generously, and encouraging one another daily. And our family follows Jesus together. We will speak in truth and love, forgive quickly, and use our gifts to bless others. Our home is a place of safety, growth, and joy. So you can kind of hear in those, there's goals in that too, right? What do we want to be focusing on daily? In the last example, right, we want to focus on speaking the truth in love. So we're going to be honest with each other from a loving perspective, right? We're not going to hold back. We're not going to, sugarcoat things, but we're going to do it out of love, and we're going to be honest. And so just kind of thinking through that too, what would you like to see happen? What do you do well now? And then kind of including that.
Just to that point.
Yeah.
The outcome doesn't matter as much as the process. Forcing your family to go through that is huge. Just examining what we do. And you can wordsmith this all day long and get an ad program to make it sound it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Thank you.
So that's wonderful.
Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate that too, because you're right. We talked about that before, right? The process is really important. It's not about sounding perfect or sounding like, oh, I'm going to put this on social media, and it's not about that. It's really about being very honest about what you want to do. And then it also helps to realize, what do we do and what could we do different, right? Because as we're writing it out, we might say, well, we really want to, for example, speak truth in love, but we don't always do that. How would we do that different, or how could we do that better? So just some scriptures to think through for encouragement.